Hi there and welcome to this Temple of Shred lesson on the A harmonic minor scale. In today's lesson we're going to go over the scale in all of its modes as well as some interesting ways to practice it with some alternate picking. We'll do some string skipping in there, and all in all this is going to be a very resourceful lesson, and I do implore you to watch this whenever you're a little bit confused about what modes to play, or just to inspire yourself to create some more exercises for yourself. So this guitar is tuned to E standard so that there's no confusion. Let's just get that out of the way. Now I'm going to be playing this at a fairly slow speed of about 130 beats per minute. Please feel free to join in. We're going to start with the A harmonic minor scale itself. So before we go any further, I want to talk about the intervals of this scale. We have a 1 here on our 5th fret on the E string. We have a 7, which is our actual 7th fret I should say rather, which is our natural second interval. We have a minor 3rd, which is our 8th fret. We've got a natural 4 and 5. We've got a flat 6 and a major 7, which is a bit peculiar because most of the time you want to hear which is a minor 7, because then it would be natural minor. That's the difference between harmonic minor and natural minor. It's one note, folks, it's one note. That one note completely diversifies the entire scale matrix on the guitar's fretboard. One of the big reasons why I've picked A harmonic minor is because the open E note at the bottom here is actually the E Phrygian dominant mode. That's where it lives. And that's a very, very popular scale mode that's been popularized by people like Yngwie Malmsteen and like Michael Romeo and a bunch of shred heads over all these years. This is one of the most important scales to learn to really encapsulate a lot of 80s shred as well as a lot of 90s and current shred. It's an extremely popular scale. Without further ado, let's do all of the modes in a go, and then I will fill in the blanks because we're going to have to play the modes that are behind the 5th fret as well. So let's begin. So as you can hear, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in there, and there's a big jump. So have you noticed that there's about 5 different shapes that you're playing? The first one, let's just call it the big shape here. It would be like something like 5, 7, and 9, right? And then there's a smaller shape that's 5, 7, and 8, 5, 6, and 8, but then there's 2 other ones. It would be like 5, 6, and 9, or 5, 8, and 9. These are some big stretches. So as you could tell by the end of the scales, when I was playing down here behind the 5th fret, I was moving my finger fingers to be in the perfect position to play those notes, because otherwise you do start to risk some injury if you're going a little bit too far. One more thing to notice is just how much the thing repeats. I played through all of that scale, and I implore you to rewatch it if you've missed something. It all repeats very comfortably. You kind of know what to expect. There's no questioning what the next interval is. Meaning to say, you'll know when you're wrong, which is really important when it comes to scales and modes, especially if you're trying to improvise in a very specific key and chord structure. So along with all of these beautiful intervals, there are chords that go along with every single mode. And because there's 7 different notes, that's 7 different starting places. That's 7 different chords that apply to this scale. And that's a lot to take in. So in this lesson, we're only going to cover a few of those chords because it's really important for you folks to know some inversions. Now, what are inversions? Well, if a chord starts, or if a chord has, 4 different notes, we've got 4 different places to play that chord. And now I'm going to show you the A harmonic minor associated chord. See how odd that sounds? It's a little bit spooky, it's a little bit unresolved. That's the real big boy Berkeley word right there. It's not resolved. At least it doesn't feel like it's ended. It feels somehow obtuse and insecure, which is a really cool thing to note. Chords have a lot of emotions to them, hey? That chord is made up of a minor third, a fifth, and a major 7, as well as its pertaining root. So that chord is really, really exciting. There's a lot of interesting things going on. But as you could tell, I didn't play on the A string. That's because I moved my 5th up onto the B string there. My 7th fret A string is an E. So it should just go up onto the high B here. And now we've got something called a dropped voicing. So we dropped that voicing all the way over and up an octave and put it on the B string. I personally really adore this kind of voicing and this kind of chordal way to approach modes because of the fact that the inversions are so interesting. So now I'm going to show you 2 inversions of this A harmonic minor weird scale chord thing that we're talking about. Now, that's all the same chord. We're just starting on a different interval inside of it. We started on our root, we went to our 3rd, and then we went up to our 5th, which is on the 12th fret. And really, it's just repetition. But what this allows you to do is improvise really eloquently, because as soon as you play a note that's outside of your chord, it's going to bring in the attention of the audience. They're going to be, oh, what just happened? And that's a really exciting thing, because that means that your improvisation can stay in a certain feeling, and as soon as you decide consciously, you can rip an entire mode up the fretboard, and it'll sound really interesting and it'll contrast to what you've just played. Here's a small demonstration of this in action. That was pretty interesting. I played an extra note in there. I played a D, which is a 4th, and I hope that you caught that. Moving on, these chords are going to be really, really fun for me to play for you here. I'm going to play the dropped voicing of every chord that corresponds to the A harmonic minor scale. Try to follow along, and if you have trouble with the fingering, pause the video and practice it. The best way to practice fingering is to obviously turn on a metronome, finger the chord, play it perfectly, and let go of the fretboard. And try to make your hands reconstruct that chord as quickly as possible. It's a great way to train your kind of chordal knowledge for your digits. That last one was quite challenging for me, and I could stand to practice that. Those are all the chords that kind of fit along and inside the key. And if you were to figure out all the inversions of all of those different 7 chords, which is what they all are, you would have an extremely vast knowledge of the fretboard. The only reason I'm not putting that into this lesson is because that would take about 15 minutes just by itself. That's a lot, and I'll probably save that for a chord specific lesson. So next we're going to talk about alternate picking and practicing our right hand technique with the scale. This exercise is an awfully Baroque sounding exercise, and this scale is inherently Baroque in and of itself. We're going to go through a variation of this little alternate picking exercise as well, where we string skip, but for now, join me in this little alternate picking exercise. That's pretty challenging, especially when you start to increase the tempo. It's not very simple to do, but it's a great thing to focus on your dexterity with your fingers and moving your thumb along into every single position to make sure that you're playing the scale appropriately for your hands, not having too much tension or anything like that. I'm not trying to squeeze the fretboard here, folks. It's a really important thing to make sure that you've got a balanced amount of tension, that you're striking the note appropriately. Now let's move on to the string skipping version of this. Now that one is a lot more of a finger twister. As you could see in the example I just gave you, my fingers want to do very specific and odd things that are kind of positionally incorrect, and that's something that I could even stand to work on. It's a really fascinating scale when it's got that extra shift, that little jump there, like between the first fret and the fourth fret on the low E string or the high E string, and that's what really gives it its flavor. It's a wonderful, magnificent Baroque thing to play. And now, to finish off this lesson, I'm going to give you a very odd exercise. This is a
alternate picking riff of doom.
I've given this to a ton of my mentorship program students, and as soon as they master it, they're really proud of themselves because it's in 2 different time signatures, but it ends up looping into a 16-note phrase. So, here we go. The alternate picking riff of doom. So did you catch what the time signature was? It's 9/8 and then it's 7/8, so that you have 16 notes, and so it becomes circular. That's a really great exercise to work on. One thing that I would highly recommend for any of you to get your alternate picking up like immensely quickly is to double pick everything. Now I'm going to use the alternate picking riff of doom as the example for what double picking means. All that it really is it's the same time in terms of notes, but you're just doubling the amount of pick strokes. So trying to be aware of your pick as it's crossing the string is really important. You're trying to feel out exactly where it sounds the best in accordance to your frets that you're fretting. It's a really great technique to focus on because then you kind of warm up as well, and it just makes you a tighter guitar player. And when it comes to shred, tightness is a huge percentage of the work. So let's do some double picking. So what do you think? Was that a challenge? How did your right hand feel about that little string skip that was in there? It's a really great exercise and I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining me for this A harmonic minor lesson. This has been a really fun lesson to put together. It's my favorite scale and I hope that it's one of your favorites as well. The amount of utility that you can get from this scale, even if you just try to throw it in a blues jam, just try it, just experiment with it, make it really familiar for yourself. And don't forget to practice, practice, practice. I've been Paul Oz, thank you for joining me. Cheers.